White tip, everybody. Just want to take everybody's attention right now to what is happening in my territory and unceded Secwepemc territory. And so-called Kamloops, my twin sister, will be going through sentencing on February 3rd and 4th. We'll be doing support for her and others that are facing charges. And there's 10 counts of criminal code charges. And as we know, Canada is all Indigenous territories. It's unceded, unsurrendered lands. We've never given up our land to treaty or war or purchase, and so we're still fighting for our lands. If you look at some of the most recent reels that I put out today, you'll see some of the violent conflict that was happening that continues to happen against Indigenous peoples in so-called Canada. That video footage is specifically from our fight there at Tiny House Warriors, and there's many different security, Trans Mountain Security. They're all former RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police that are all different types of skill sets that these RCMP, but when the Trans Mountain Pipeline was coming in, they hired and gave contracts to their buddies that are part of the RCMP. So they took leave from the RCMP job to run the Trans Mountain Pipeline security. So these were well-skilled RCMP that we are facing off with in the guise of Trans Mountain Security, and that's what you'll see in the footage. You'll see how they attacked my sister. I'm an identical twin. My sister's name is Secwepemc. It means weasel woman, and a really strong, powerful name in our Tnaqa And I can't be there today in Kamloops court with her. So I'm doing this in solidarity and just to really send my love to my twin sister, so she's not standing alone today in the trial in the Kamloops courts, and they're threatening to come and take her away. Her lawyer said, be prepared that they're going to come and take you and handcuff you and bring you to jail today. So we're really concerned about her. She's, because of the attack that she had from this, or the attack that this fucking Trans Mountain Pipeline workers did on her, she is severely still injured by that. And so it caused permanent damage. And after reviewing the Trans Mountain security footage, their camera on their hard hat, they pointed at my twin sister, Mayuk, who we're talking about right now, and said, that's Kanahu. So they attacked her thinking that she was me. And that's just even worse, that she's inflicted upon these permanent harm because of that. But because we're standing on the front line, and when we talk about the front line, when we're Indigenous people and we're talking about the front line, we're talking about conflict with Canada or the colonial nation state, which is like the settler state of Canada. Just like Israel, what do they say? Like the occupation. And even civilian occupation is an act of war. And Canadians may not think that, but it is. It's an act of war unless you're riding, side by side with Indigenous people for our Indigenous land rights. Your civilian occupation is an act of war. So in this case, we're dealing with a pipeline that's massive, 1,152 kilometers long, coming from the Alberta tar sands to Vancouver, Burnaby, Tsleil-Waututh territory, and then impacting all of the coastal area and the Coast Salish territories, putting them in this oil now in super tankers once it gets to the coast and all the way down to the California refineries. So what we're doing is not only fighting for our Indigenous rights to our land, but we're fighting, against extreme oil. That's some of the biggest culprits and criminals in this climate war and destroying our earth. And so we're really freedom fighters for the earth, and that's what's happening today. Is they're trying to criminalize for Indigenous peoples for fighting for our lands, to protect the water, to protect the mountains, to protect the integrity of our whole Secwepemc territory, our Indigenous land rights, our human rights, and uniting with all Indigenous people around the world that are fighting extractive industries right now. And My sister, she lives on at Niskalnith. We're from Niskalnith Indian Reserve, and she's been fighting a lot on a lot of different front lines, including Secwepemc on Peak Ski Resort. She built a cordwood house while she was a part of Native Youth Movement. The government came and bulldozed it down, similar to what happened in Israel with the Palestinian every time, bulldozing our homes right down to the ground. And she involved in this, and she did jail time for that. They put her in jail for that too. And we don't want her to go to jail. We want her to stay free. And, just as they're letting out, one of the longest led political prisoners, Leonard Peltier, we're still at the state where Indigenous peoples are still political prisoners as we're fighting against this colonial system. We've never chosen to be a part of this system, and the actual province of British Columbia doesn't have jurisdiction over Indigenous peoples or our land. Yeah, we're continuing to face the criminalization under their Crown's court system. And Kamloops courts, it's a very racist town, Kamloops. It's really based off of industry. And Fort Kamloops, Hudson Bay, just very colonial in its construct. It's the joining of two rivers to Kamloops, which is Secwepemc territory. And it was an area of great trading and economics because it was the joining of the two rivers. So a lot of Indigenous people went there for trade, but hence why the Hudson Bay Company wanted to keep it as their own. So there was some warriors that burnt that Hudson Bay fort down like 3 times. But the Indian Reserve, and we know how it is when Indian reserves are set up right beside a city or a big municipality or urban area, then we're really impacted by colonization, Indigenous peoples that are located by cities. So, Kamloops, we faced off a lot of times with industry, only for industry to buy out Indigenous peoples, the brown business people, and sell out on us natives. And so that's another big long story. But my message right now is to keep my sister Mayuk out of their clutches and free them all and keep her out of jail today. So also she doesn't have a phone. She doesn't have her phone. Her phone just quit on her, and probably by the state, so she doesn't have a phone, and she's going into this trial or this sentencing, which is 2 days, February 3rd and 4th. We're asking people to stay updated by, some of her page when she has a chance. We're going to try to go live on YouTube together because she has access to her YouTube. So we're going to go do live there. I'm going to go on Facebook, going to go on Twitter. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. Share this around. We're still fighting and resisting against big oil, where Tiny House Warriors has built a big a kitchen on wheels, and that's going to be the feast house for us to travel to all these Indigenous communities so we could get organized and face off with this extreme oil and these colonial governments that are continuing to ignore our rights to say no to these big projects. So yeah, fuck Trans Mountain Pipeline, fuck Canada, down with the Crown, free all political prisoners, free Palestine, fuck the police, and hopefully drop all the charges and keep my sister free.
Here's Nicole Manuel and how she defines Indigenous food sovereignty.
So I was thinking about several things, like how I'd like to start off, but I really do think it's important to talk about this day in particular, which is Columbus Day and Thanksgiving Day. And that's what the problems are stemming from, is from that colonization. And I see all these different nations that are European nations or from somewhere else that have a homeland that's somewhere else. My homeland is here. And I guess when the voyage Columbus came here, it was a recon expedition to explore new lands for food market. They came here, and 2 years later, first they came with 3 ships. When they came back 2 years later, They came back with 17 ships and all their soldiers, their military, with plans to occupy and settle our lands. They did this through massacres, tortures, rapes, scorched earth policies where they destroyed our entire food systems. And within a century, tens of millions of Indigenous people died through these massacres and diseases. This is important because what we're trying to do is stop this process of colonization. Us Indigenous people, we haven't been colonized yet. Our land, yes, our land is occupied. And I know the Summit people, the white people here, or other settler races here aren't going away. But the government still tries to push that policy, the colonization, through assimilation.
How is everything going?
Oh, just grounded all out the thing today. Holy. Crown is looking for 374 days for Nikki. 360 days for Aisha. And 284 days for Sammy.
Okay, let me just say it again. 374.
For Nikki. And 360 days for Aisha. And 284 days for Sammy, and 187 days for Trish. And then just Trish's lawyer went up after, I don't know who's next after. Maybe Sammy's lawyer next. But he's looking for, I don't know what do you call it, a discharge? She should walk out of there with no criminal charges. She's got her future ahead of her. You know, he did all her Claudia report of how she was raised in foster home and that. But I heard him at one time say 24 months probation. Because in those 3 years, you know, nothing never happened between. So, oh my God, I cried when I came out of the courthouse.
We're going into the second day of my youth and the other land defenders sentencing in Kamloops Courthouse, unceded Secwepemc territory. And I wanted just to take a few minutes just to talk about what happened yesterday as they were closing their session. They were talking and they were bringing up the Gladue reports. And the Gladue reports, for people that don't know, is a part of the law and the sentencing where they are taking into consideration Indigenous peoples and the impacts of colonization had on Indigenous people in sentencing, the impacts that colonization had on their personal daily lives as Indigenous peoples, First Nations people in so-called Canada. And so it was really triggering because they end up reading out those Gladue reports and in the court in front of settler society and everybody that was in there, and the sheriffs and everything, and they got to hear these more intimate and traumatic experiences that these Indigenous people and the defendants in court went through. So what we were seeing in these Gladue reports is that, yeah, we have to go through all these triggering memories, and these Gladue reporters are asking us all these questions that fill out all these answers to the report, and pretty well like on a point system of how fucked up you got traumatized as children and as Indigenous peoples in the system. Yet I put all the blame on Canada and the white supremacist system that Canada still acts under is the impacts that colonization has had on our people, the white school system, etc. The prison system, the court system is unjust. And so now we're going into day 2 of sentencing, and my family are saying it doesn't look good. The Crown prosecutor is just really painting our people out who are land defenders, like Tiny House Warriors who care about the earth, that care about the water, even more than most people do, because they're actually putting their life on the line for the protection of the water and protection of the moose meat and the salmon and everything that us as Secwepemc people continue to love and continue to live and survive off of.